Hello, this is Julian with Coffee Reviews, and today we'll be reviewing the Genji Challa wash processed Ethiopia from Manhattan Coffee Roasters. And there's the bag right there. And Manhattan, based out of Rotterdam, Netherlands, and they're the European roaster that's appeared the most on this channel, and Sweet Bloom's the American roaster that's appeared the most on this channel, and they both decided to release a Genji Challa around the same time. So I decided to purchase and review both of these coffees from two of my favorite coffee roasters, beginning with this one from Manhattan right here. And interestingly enough, it's been about a year since the last time I reviewed one of Manhattan's more standard wash processed offerings. So the last one was the Keratina, a wash processed Kenya, so I'm looking forward to finally discussing another of their standard washed offerings, as this right here is day 40. And recipe we settled on for this coffee was our standard Manhattan recipe, a 16:1 water to coffee ratio, brewed at 208 degrees Fahrenheit, and I like this one best through the V60, which indicates a more medium fine grind. Manhattan is a European light for the roast profile. With all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and start discussing this coffee. Day 10, first impression and clean and light. Those are the two notes that I will have most consistently throughout the time drinking this coffee, as clean and light, as it wasn't necessarily the most intense Ethiopia, with a slight bit of this berry hard candy aspect to the cup after a little bit of this kind of more tame base initially to it. It does increase in the overall vibrancy as it cools down, and you get a little bit more sweetness to the cup, but the first impression I had was that it was just potential, as I didn't necessarily feel the most vibrant cup of coffee from this first try. Day 12 ran it through the Chemex and clean and light yet again. As I say, that will be a consistent theme throughout this coffee. Slightly less vibrant through this brew method, with much of the slight berry components taking prominence yet again, but it was still in relative comparison to the more tame base of this coffee. Slightly grainer with this sweeter cereal aspect to the cup as well. First time I had experienced that, and I kind of link it to the honey because it was a little bit more of this kind of floral honey aspect. And up to this point, it wasn't necessarily the most pronounced characteristic, which was this kind of slight berry candy aspect. But from this point going forward, you will see a little bit of a shift in the coffee, as on day 15, it really started to open up. And when it did open up, there was a lot more of the lighter honey aspect to it. And that's going to be reflected in the tasting wheel and the floral component of that tasting wheel, as it was much more of the lighter floral honey as opposed to the darker honey, which I experienced from some other coffee roasters. But it feels a fair bit like tea with honey inside of it, like a berry tea with a fair bit of honey inside of it. So that was the impression I took away, but I was seeing an increase in the coffee from this point. Day 17, another day through the Chemex, and it continued to remain light and clean with a little bit more vibrancy as compared to the earlier days, so the cup is opening up. It seems to be trending more in the lighter honey sense, but it seems to be trending more in the vibrancy direction, so I am just saying that time is doing this cup of coffee a lot of good, as on day 19, it was the best day I'd experienced of this coffee, as I ran it through the V60, and I saw so much more vibrancy from it as a whole, with an increased honeyed sweetness, and a little bit more of the lively, darker berries in the vibrancy of this cup. Still reminiscent of a more strong berry tea with a fair bit of honey in it. So, liking the way that the coffee is trending. On day 22, another day of this coffee being slightly sweeter and reminiscent of that berry tea. This time I'm getting a little bit more citrus in the cup itself. Very much reminded me of adding some lemon to that berry tea that we already have with so much of that honey. Light and clean, yet again, with general improvement just as you give it time and give it an opportunity to cool down. As once it does cool down, you see a lot more of the sweetness, whereas beforehand it can be ever so slightly grainy and ever so slightly light. Day 25, cup seems to have settled at this point. It's been consistent throughout the last couple of days, as it seems like it's rounded off in that distinct honey aspect, complemented by a slight bit of this citrus, and I was getting a little bit more of this kind of tart berry candy sweetness within the cup itself. But one thing that's worth noting here is on day 40, it is actually the best day I've experienced of this coffee. And it's one of those Manhattan cheat code things where oftentimes you can let the coffee rest for an even longer extended period of time, and it either doesn't drop off or it just actually gets better. And I think that's kind of the case where maybe holding off on this coffee even longer than the 30-day mark would have actually made this coffee better. All right, let's go ahead and put up the tasting wheel so you can see what we're getting. And 3 level 4s, so let's go through those real quick. The cleanliness, level 4. It's rare that I put anything that's not a geisha at a level 5, but this is on the cleaner side of things. If there's anything maybe slightly taking away from it, it's the slight graininess that I was experiencing. Not overly pronounced or prominent on this day. It is way more of that floral honey and a sweeter aspect on this day. So Level 4 seems about perfect. It's like the epitome of a level 4 for cleanliness. Sweetness, level 4, and here's the thing about the sweetness is I feel like on the earlier days it was maybe a little bit of a stretch to put it at level 4, as it wasn't necessarily the sweetest coffee. It was so light and tame on those earlier days that it was a little bit of a stretch, but much more time has really helped this coffee increase in the sweetness. So now it's definitely a level 4. Earlier days, definitely lower side, higher side of that level 3, and it was being a little generous initially charting this coffee in that level 4 mark, but I could definitely see it now as it has increased a lot. Berry fruit, level 4. This one's kind of interesting because this is also on the lower side of the level 4. I think the main reason I put it there was because the citrus aspect, which is at that level 3 mark, is secondary in the fruit characteristics to the berry, but it is a little bit more pronounced. I just wanted to emphasize the fact that the berry is in more abundance than the citrus, so I wanted to chart it one level higher than the citrus fruit. So that's why we have the citrus at level 3, berry fruit a little generous at the level 4. Would probably keep that on the lower side of that level 4, higher side of the level 3 mark. Other things worth discussing, the florality, and I've been saying that it's a more floral honey, a lighter honey aspect in this coffee. Definitely justified at the level 3 mark for me. It's quite nice. I really like it when I experience that from a coffee. Acidity level 3, fair bit of acidity, not too surprising given what this coffee is. And then the finish at level 3, the coffee does seem to round off pretty even, so it doesn't have the most lasting finish. And what that lasting finish is a little bit more of a subtle finish regardless. So I think it looks good at that level 3 mark. Only thing worth discussing other than that is the body level 2. I mean, it's wash processed Ethiopia. That's not surprising in any manner. But for the most part, I like the way that this tasting wheel looks. I think it's a pretty accurate representation of what I was getting throughout the time drinking this coffee. I've just seen an increase in the overall vibrancy and sweetness towards the end of this coffee. All right, so my overall thoughts and impressions of this coffee, I thought it was good. I think sometimes when it comes to lighter profiled Ethiopian coffees, they might come off a little bit too tame for me. And I feel like that was the case. I was expecting much more of the vibrant berries, maybe something a little bit more vibrant in terms of the blackberry that was akin to a wash processed Kenyan coffee, or in terms of the blueberry, hoping for something that was as vibrant as a natural processed Ethiopia. But that's always a little bit of a stretch. That's a little bit of a nitpicking thing that I'm going with this coffee. But that's typically what I do with Ethiopian coffees, is that I can be a little nitpicky. This coffee, if anything, it was a little bit more pretty than I think I was expecting. I did want a little bit more vibrancy from it, hoping it was skewing more in the berry direction as opposed to the honey direction, but given that that's what I was experiencing, it still reached that level 4 mark for sweetness, so I don't have any complaints about it. Not necessarily my favorite Ethiopia, but it basically did the job. Type of person I would suggest this coffee to. If you do like the lighter honey profile of coffees, then I think that this one's a really nice one for you, as it was complemented greatly by the more subtle berry aspects to it, in addition to that a little bit of a citrus, and it still had the sweetness and clarity that you look for in wash processed Ethiopian coffees. So in that sense, it hit all the marks that you kind of need as a requisite for any sort of wash processed coffee. So for that reason, I think that would be a really nice fit for you. For the most part, I think I'll leave this review at that. If you by chance had an opportunity to try this coffee, I'd love to know your thoughts and impressions of it as well. If you're enjoying the content, give this video a like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed. This right here has been a review of the Genji Challa, wash processed Ethiopia from Manhattan Coffee Roasters. Thank you for watching.